Hello and welcome to today's video. We'll be working with JavaScript variables today. When it comes to variables, there are four main ways to declare variables in JavaScript. First, we have the var keyword. This is an older form of declaration. This does cause some issues when it comes to scope, as the var essentially is a global variable, so this no longer is the recommended way to declare variables. However, if you are working on some legacy stuff, this could be useful. Second, we have the newer let keyword. If this variable is to be changed frequently or updated all the time, this is a recommended way of declaring a variable. This is a scoped declaration. What this means is that if you define a variable using let inside a function, it is only accessible inside that function. We will check out some examples shortly, as this is a very important topic to understand. Third, we have the const. This is short for constant. This is a variable that does not change, so once you have declared a variable as a const, that means it cannot be reassigned to something else. This seems a little counterintuitive, as the name variable implies it is, well, variable. However, the reason for this is that a const is handled differently to a let, and through a bunch of black magic it uses less memory to store than a variable, so if your variable isn't going to change, use const. Fourth, we have nothing. Indeed, you can just write a variable name with no keyword and JavaScript will assume it's a variable. However, don't do this ever, under no circumstance, like ever. Just don't. Anyway, when do you choose which variable type to use? Here are some guidelines. If the value isn't going to be changed, such as pi, then use const. If you want to stop a type from being changed, such as arrays or objects, then use const. While const doesn't allow you to change values, if you have an array as a const, you can still add values to it, but can't change it into a string instead of an array. Let is used when const can't work. Var, well, like the weird USB type B cable that you keep just in case you need to use a printer from 10 years ago, it's like that, only to support the legacy systems. Dope. We now know how to declare variables. What's next? Identifiers. Identifiers are just what variable names are called. Variables must be unique unless it's in a different scope. More on this in a bit. However, there are some rules for creating names. 1. You cannot use reserved words such as function, let, or case. I'll add a link in the description if you would like to see the list of reserved words. 2. Names can contain letters, digits, underscores, and dollar signs. However, I wouldn't recommend using the last two. Number 3. You can start a variable name with a dollar sign or an underscore, but once again, just don't do this. There are very specific scenarios where this is a normal thing to do, so err on the side of this is not one of those and don't use them. Names are case sensitive, so variable a is not the same as variable a. Now, let's look at assignments. First, remember that in JavaScript, the equal sign is the assignment operator, not the equal to. So in order to create a variable, we will say const x equals 10, const y equals 30, and lastly, const total equals x plus y. JavaScript is not a strongly typed language, so that means that x equals 10 can be reassigned to x equals the word 10, and this won't cause an issue with JavaScript. However, you can't use any math operations on this as it's now a string. So this means we don't need to tell JavaScript what type our variable is, we can just give it a value and it will decide on its own what the type is. So if we do the following, let's say const y equals words, this will automatically turn it into a string. If we say const z equals 123, this will automatically be converted into a number. Now, there are some more things to know about variables. You can declare a variable without assigning it a value. This will automatically be seen as an undefined value. So if we say let a, then print the value of a, we will just get an undefined value back. This means no value has been assigned as yet. However, this only works with let and var. Const requires that some value be assigned to it. Now, there are some best practices when it comes to variables. Firstly, don't start your variables with numbers. Second, keep your variable name short but descriptive. Don't say variable that will be incremented by 1 on each iteration of the loop. Also, don't say vs1. That is not very descriptive, and it is very difficult for whoever reads your code to try and figure out what that means. If you use a variable name that is too long, this can also cause an issue, as this will just jumble up the code with more words than needs to be there. Sometimes you can use short variable names like I, J, or N, but these are a standard in most scenarios, and we will see them later on in this course. Now, there are many different coding styles. This does not really affect all that much. However, I would suggest picking a style and sticking with it. For JavaScript, I prefer the Hungarian style of variable naming. This means you add the type of variable before the name and capitalize every subsequent word. So a string variable called name-surname would be S name-surname, or an object containing all the information on a dog would be O dog-info. So we know immediately it's an object. Now let's do some stuff. Let's create 3 variables: n number 1, n number 2, and n total. We can write the following: let n number 1 equal 10, let n number 2 equal 20, and let n total equal n number 1 plus n number 2. And then we will just use a console.log n total. This will output 30. You can also be a super hardcore JavaScript guru and do the following. You can say let n number 1 equal 10, comma, n number 2 equal 20, comma, n total equal n number 1 plus n number 2. Those are functionally the same thing. However, if you have 10 variables to declare, it would become a little hard to read. Luckily, JavaScript is hella chill about syntax, so you can write it like this. In this example, we have the let keyword, then n number 1 equals 10, comma, and it repeats the same as before. However, they are separated by lines. JavaScript does not care about blank lines, so you can just write them as is. Rad. Now let's add a little spice to this equation. If n number 1 equals 1 and n number 2 equals 2, let's add a third and call it s number 3 and give it a value of 3, but in quotes. So this is now a string. Now if you console.log that, you'll get 1, 2, 3. That certainly does not check out when it comes to maths. That's because if there is a string anywhere in an equation, everything in that equation is now a string and gets concatenated instead of operated on. Now let's learn about scope. There is global scope, function scope, and block scope. Initially, when var was used, it was only global scope. In this example, we have a variable called sname, which equals 0cool. Then we have a function called funcScope with the sname in it declared again. However, if you console.log sname, you will get out 0cool. There's also a second function called funcDifferentScope, and if you console.log sname there again, you will get 0cool again. Function scope means that if you declare a variable inside a function, it is only used in that function and nowhere else. In this example, we have another variable called sname the second, which equals acid burn. Sname the second is only available within the func scope. If you were to console.log sname the second, it will output acid burn. If you now console.log sname the second in the function funcDifferentScope, it will give you an error. The reason for this is that the sname the second was declared specifically in the func scope function and not in this one. Block scope. Then what exactly is block scope? Anything inside curly braces is considered a block. So in this example we have a function called func first function. In that function we have a variable called s function level. This equals to crash override. That variable, s function level, is available throughout the entirety of this function. However, inside this function we have a nested function called func level 2. Inside this function we have another variable called s block level, and that equals serial killer. This s block level variable is only available inside func level 2. If you tried to print s block level in the func first function, you will get an error as it was not declared in that scope. As always, you have leveled up in programming. You are now an expert in JavaScript variables. I just want to say thank you for all the feedback and support on this journey. You guys have been absolute legends. On that note, see you in the next one.